Hello again. This time I'd like to show you how to configure some basic adjustments, especially for recording. In the Z280, they are quite similar to the Z190. And also the second part of the video is going to be about how to configure the streaming with QoS, with quality of service, against a server that we have in Prague, in the Czech Republic. So what I have here, in order to show you all that, is a Ninja Blade, which is going to record the menu output from the camera, obviously the camera, a 4J dongle from Huawei, I think it's the manufacturer, and also my laptop, from which I will access the remote server, but that is the second part of the video. So to start with, the camera, as you know, both the Z190 and the Z280 can work in 4K, well, actually Ultra HD, so 4 times Full HD, also in HDR mode. In the Z190, it can be through the HLG hybrid log gamma curve, while in the Z280, it can be HLG or slog3. So I'm going to show you how to configure that HDR. That's why I'm wearing this jacket. This is the typical HDR jacket that crosses the signal in the highlights and especially in the colors. So that is what I'm going to do, and to explain how to do that in the Z280. So basically what we need to access to is to the system, and over there the first submenu that we can find is the base setting. So that is where I can select the HDR or HDR mode within the camera. Then once you have selected the HDR mode, you can select which gamma curve to use. It can be either the HLG, hybrid log gamma, or the slog3. HLG stands for hybrid log gamma, as I have told you, which means that it's a hybrid gamma curve. Hybrid because it is composed by two sections. First one is the same as the 709 gamma curve, but reduced to half, to 0, so multiplied by 0.5, and that is up to 100 nits. And from 100 nits on, it is a logarithmic gamma curve. So that allows us to transmit to both systems, to SDR and HDR. The SDR systems will filter, let's say, the signal up to 100 nits, multiply by 2 the gamma curve up to that point, and then they can work in 709 gamma space, let's say, or gamma signal, gamma curve. While the fully HDR systems can use the whole set of the camera with much more luminance. This is nothing to see, as you can see, with the color space. That is why it was stuck in my brain, because on one side you have the resolution, the 4K resolution, on the other side you have the gamma curve, and on the other side you have the color space. So you need to know what is the relationship between those, amongst those three parameters, let's say, but it is not necessary to be in 4K for doing HDR and vice versa. And this is an example, because I'm going to leave the HLG mode, but the recording format is not necessarily going to be 4K. I can leave it in Full HD. So in this case, I could work with HLG gamma curve in a Full HD system, which is as how to say, intermediate status. It's quite smart. I consider it quite smart, because adapting your system to 4K might be much more difficult than converting your HD system into HDR. So that is why many people and many broadcasters are asking about this capability. And in fact, this is nothing new, because maybe you remember in the F3, you could work with a slog2, I think it was by that time, in a Full HD system, as the F3's sensor was. So this is an example of what is the relationship, but not the strict or mandatory assignment between the resolution and the gamma curve. I'm going to leave it in 4K. I insist it is 4K for TV. This is a typical broadcast camera, so I consider that it makes sense to have 3840 pixels in horizontal instead of the real, what people call real 4096, which corresponds to the 4K typically in cinema. Here is where we select the codec. So it can be XAVC Intra, XAVC Long Op, MPEG HD 422, so the typical XDCAM HD codec that is used almost everywhere. And the last one, the 420, is the typical XDCAM EX codec. What is the problem? If we select, for instance, MPEG HD 422, it doesn't, how to say, allows to have 4K resolution. That is why when you are working in 4K, you need to go into XAVC Intra or Long Op. I'm going to leave it in Long Op. And here is where you select the frame rate. If you switch it into 60 frames per second, that is what will happen. It says, do you want to change the system frequency? And then it reboots the camera because it needs to adapt or to adjust the clock in the system to 60 Hertz or 59.94 instead of 50. So I'm not going to do that, but here is where you can do that. Also, another thing to configure is the proxy recording, which is not in this system part, but in the recording menu. Then you can see the proxy recording mode, and you can select either to generate it or not. So the moment you generate a high-res file, that can be either HD or 4K, a proxy file can be generated in parallel. Because in Sony, we typically recommend people to edit in proxy and render in high-res. So this would be the option to do that. And here is where you configure the resolution of that proxy, which is very, very interesting in this camera because you have the capability to do it in full HD at 9 megabits per second. Here in Spain, I live in Spain, when you transmit through the terrestrial digital TV, it is typically a bandwidth of 4 up to 6, 7 megabits per second. So many broadcasters are doing the proxy recording, the high-res recording at 50 megabits per second, and then the rendering at 50 megabits per second. But when they shoot or launch the signal to the air, then it is reduced significantly to, as I said, 4, 6 megabits per second. So that is something that is a bottleneck. So many people, as time passes, surprisingly, is jumping down to edit in proxy and render also in proxy. And this is a very good solution because you can do that in full HD. So here is where you can configure the proxy. By the way, in the right side of our cameras, in the X200, X180, also obviously in Z280 and Z190, the proxy generation of the clips and the streaming and upload function and the typical network functions are settled in the right side of the camera. That is why, if you take a look on the proxy resolutions that you can generate, they are basically the same as you can generate for streaming, because this is the same signal stream, let's say. And now let's go to the outputs, which is also an interesting part of this basic configuration, which is here you can select which outputs to activate. In fact, I was surprised that we have a video. I assume it's a composite video signal. So now, as I am recording in the Ninja Blade, I have activated the HDMI. I could also activate the SDI. Yes, sorry, in this case, I couldn't activate both if I am doing the network client mode thing. That is the second part of the video. So here is where you could configure that. Output format could be obviously for HDMI 4K, but also 4K for SDI, which is the big surprise, one of the big surprises of this camera. Because through SDI, you can output a 4K signal. Why? Because it's not just a 3G SDI speed interface, but also at 12, it can reach up to 12 gigabit per second SDI protocol. So in that case, if you have an equipment on the other side of the cable that can understand and can talk the language of 12G SDI, it can ingest the 4K signal. But at this moment, what I have is the Full HD interlaced, because my Ninja Blade can only understand, in this case, the signal. So that is what I'm going to leave configured. And also, obviously, in the output display, I want to output my menus so that they can be recorded in the Ninja Blade. So that is why this is in on. And now let's go to the second part of the video. I will start recording through VLC my screen, and what I'm going to do is to insert my camera, or to stream from my camera to the server that we have in Prague. Before that, let me explain which are the basic three things that I can do in this kind of cameras. So first one is to do a file transfer. That file transfer can be both for the proxy files or for the high-res files. For the proxy files, I can even leave them in auto mode. This auto upload mode allows me to upload the proxies automatically once they are generated. So for instance, if I am shooting, I press the record button to start the recording, I press the record button to stop it. So at the same time, a high-res file that can be either HD or 4K is generated, but in parallel, I have a proxy recording. And that proxy recording can start transmitting to an FTP the moment I have pressed the button. So there is a queue of jobs to do, and one of them is to upload that proxy. So that is very helpful, because if you are, for instance, shooting in the morning for news that are going to be at noon, from the field, you can be uploading those proxy files. And as I have told you, they can be even in Full HD. For the high-res files, obviously they cannot be, or they shouldn't be with automatic upload, because they can even be in 4K. 4K, if you are outputting through 4G connection, it occupies a lot of bandwidth and it wakes a lot. And that is something we preferably prefer to avoid. So in that case, I can select manually which files to upload into the server. If we go one step ahead of that, we can use the XD Camera platform, which allows us to do one very smart thing, which is once the EDL with the proxies has been generated, that EDL is pushed to the camcorders that are involved in that production, and the camcorder understands that EDL and only uploads the high-res sequences, not the files, but just the parts of the files that are involved in that production. So for instance, from second 3 to 12 and second 25 to 32, but not the whole clip. So that way it is much faster, it is much more automated, and I can save a lot of cost in terms of bandwidth, or in megabit to transfer. So that is related to the FTP upload. Second thing I can do is a streaming, the typical streaming from that you could see that on an FS5 and X70 with myself over there in the billiard pool table, doing that with two cameras. These are not the same, but they are quite similar. So in that case, you can stream video to another device. But that other device, if it is switched off or there is any problem in the network, the camera is not knowing that. So it's let's say a very lazy or a bit stupid way to do the streaming, unless my network is very safe, secured, and I know the bandwidth that I can work with. The third option, which is an evolution of that one, is the network client mode. In fact, network client mode doesn't refer only to streaming. There are plenty of things that we can do. because the network client mode is how the camera is logged into our XDCAM Air system. You don't need the XDCAM Air system to work with the QoS streaming. But if you want to add more functions to that, for instance, to have a dual link connection to the server, in that case, you need to do it through the XDCAM Air platform, which is not the case that I am talking about in this video. So in the network client mode, there is a dialogue, a conversation between the camera and the server. And the camera is sending the video packets to the receiver, which is the server. But if at any moment the server cannot reconfigure the signal, then it, let's say, phones the camera and says, please send me more from this packet to this one, because every packet has a number, an ID number, and then the server can reconfigure the whole signal, as I was saying, according to two parameters, which are the ones that you can see here. This is the interface of the Prague server that we have in the Czech Republic. I am in Madrid, so it's far away from here. And here you can see that the network range can be very high, middle, or low. This is basically transferred or translated into video is the bit rate or the quality, the signal quality. And the other parameter is the delay. The delay is how much a signal can be later than another one, to tell it basically. So for instance, in scenario one, you are shooting a football match and the ball is about to reach one of the defenders. You change your take, change your camera, and then the ball hasn't even left the prior player. That is not correct, because you lose the sense of continuity in the movement. People is used to have some signal losses. That is something that we can subconsciously sacrifice in order to have continuity in the signal. So for instance, when there is a celebration, we see a very awful and very horrible signal, especially due to the confetti, but that is something that we assume that is that way, because we prefer to have the immediate signal reaching us. On the other hand, imagine that a very important personality is some character is being interviewed. In that case, maybe you have a scenario, you have something that has been very carefully designed. There is a background that is very detailed. In that case, the audience understands that 1 second more or less is not a big issue, but the quality of signal is much more important. So in that case, the priority would be the network range, or in other words, the bit rate. So according to those parameters, the signal is being conformed. How do we configure that? I have, by the way, reset. There is a network reset option here, which is what I have done just before starting this video. I'm not going to do that because that invites me to switch off the camera and switch it on again. So that's something I don't want to do right now. But trust me, I did it. In fact, one demonstration of that is that in all the profiles there is nothing inputted. For instance, the CCM address, in none of them has been inputted. How to configure that? Firstly, I can select up to 3 profiles. So imagine that you are streaming with a big broadcaster in the morning, with I don't know, a regional broadcaster for the noon news, and in the afternoon you are working with your own production facility. So in that case, you can select up to 3 profiles. And then let's edit, for instance, profile number 3. This profile number 3, I'm going to call it Prague. Sorry, I'm going to delete all the name of that profile. And now it's going to be called Prague, because that is easy to understand. That is where our server is. The CCM address is the address of the server that I'm going to stream to. It can be either a nickname like www or whatever you want it to be, or it can be a public address. In this case, this is a public address, but it is fixed. This is something that you need to contract and pay for. This has been done in the Czech Republic, and that is as I was telling you, a strange but public fixed IP address. It's strange because the typical addresses that you may have been working with are the typical 192.168 blah blah blah, which are the local network addresses. But this one is a public network, and that is why it is so strange. It's the 88.86 123 35. Okay, done. The CCM port is the port through which all those packets of information of video will be inputted through. So, camera is connected to the internet, to the cloud. I don't want that word, but to the cloud via 4G. And on the other side of the globe, in Czech Republic, there is a public IP address called 88.86 blah blah blah, and all the traffic that goes to that address, to that IP address through the port 8443 is going to be rerouted via NAT, I think it's the name, to a local IP address, which is the 192.168 blah blah blah, which is the local address that the server has in that network over there in Prague, in that studio. So I will keep it with that name and with that number of port. Username and password, I know them, so that part is going to be edited in the final video. But that is something that you can establish in the server that I have in my back over there, that interface, if you are logged in as an administrator. So I'm inputting right now the username and password. I think it's okay right now. I did it too fast, so let me correct it. CCM certificate, I will leave it with none value. Camera control, I will leave it in enable. What does this mean? This means, obviously, if you are a camera operator, that is something that you don't like a lot, because there are some parameters that can be applied to your camera, even if you are not doing that directly. But these are typically, for instance, metadata for a job, something that comes from the XDCAM Air platform. So that is something that you can leave enabled. This is not going to be applied, I think, to the focus or the zoom, but it is much more related to the workflow, let's say. So you shouldn't be worried a lot about that, and if you are, you can leave it in disable. I will leave it in always, and I will press set. Now, when I select one of my three profiles, I can see 1, 2, and Prague. Now it has the nickname that I set for that. I will leave it in Prague. But I'm not going to apply that profile yet, because I want you to take a look on this interface here. This is the camera that is going to be switched on, so that is the thumbnail related or corresponding to this camera. But also I want to take a look on the LCD screen that you can see here. You can see that up there you have the 4G coverture or the intensity of the signal, which is okay. But you will see also that in the right side, close to the battery life, you will see some NCM logo, which initially, the moment I press on here, will be in black mode. And the moment that the camera is commissioned or logged into the NCM system, into the QoS system, it will be white. And the moment I press streaming, there another logo will appear with the STRM letters over there, and that is the indicator that you are streaming, actually streaming from the camera. So let's take a look on what happens in both the LCD and the interface. If I put it in on, you will see now much better that now the NCM is in black color, but the moment that it is inside the network, now it is white, and you can see now after a few seconds, you can see that something is going on here. And now also in the LCD, you can see the STRM signal, which means that is an indicator for the camera operator that something is going on. Also, you have here the online LED on the button number 4, assignable button, that something is being streamed. So be careful, because if you're in a hotel, for instance, and you leave that in automatic mode, then something might be seen. So if right now I stop the streaming, you will see that the STRM letters have been disabled, let's say, and now it is not in green, saying that it is being streamed out to the SDI 1, 2, or the 3, 4. That is something that I can select, those outputs. But now simply the signal is over there, like in a previous bus. That is something that you can see here. It's like a kind of matrix. So you have plenty of inputs. Most of them are switched off. That's why they are in black color. But my camera here is the one that I have at this very moment, and I could select that from my panel, and I could press start streaming. Now it will be green, and now you can see the STRM mode here, the indicator. So I really hope this is useful for you. You can take a look also on the rest of the videos, especially related to this, for instance, with the X200, in which I provide a much deeper explanation about all this interface. But if you are just starting with that and you need to configure something very, very fast, I hope this is useful. The good news is that once you have configured all those profiles, there is no need to know more about them. Even if you need to create or to adjust a new profile, is basically those 4 parameters that I have told you, which is the server or the IP address, the port, user, and password. And those are the basic 4 things that you will need to input. But if you are a camera operator, you would probably need to just select which profile to apply, and then set it to on, and then you will be logged into the system. So I really hope this was useful for you. Sorry for my English, sorry for my jacket, and nice to talk to you again, and thanks for your comments and your questions and your likes and dislikes also. So bye.